be honest with you. But on you go.
Okay. Hello and welcome back to The Cine Skinny. It's the film podcast from The Skinny Magazine. Everyone's engaged and happy to be here. It is me, Peter, with Anahi, Ellie, and Jamie. Hello, everybody. How are we all?
Hello.
Yeah,
Good.
yeah, good.
Not too bad.
How are you, Peter?
I'm all right. I'm good.
Great.
Is there a weird buzzing in
There
anyone
is.
else's
I
headphones?
think it
Yeah.
might be
The lights?
that light, which is one of those switches.
It was a loose connection. But we're all doing well, so that's nice. And we've had some fun doing some diagnostics. So that's a fun start to the episode. So on this week's episode, we decided we'd have a fun one because some of the bigger releases that were more Cine Skinny appropriate seemed a bit...
Tell the truth, Peter.
I didn't want to watch Green Border because I'd just come back from one music festival. I'm just about to go to another music festival. I didn't want to spend 2 hours and 45 minutes watching what I hear is a very, very good but quite dark film.
Yeah, I hear it's really fucking sad.
Yeah, but it's 5 stars from us,
Oh,
from
I'm
Carmen.
sure.
So
Yeah,
go
yeah.
and see it by
Yeah.
all means. But we have not watched it.
No,
Instead,
absolutely
we watched a film about Russell Crowe as a down on his luck actor doing a remake of The Exorcist, and a film about a geriatric woman trying to take revenge on some corrupt legal guardians. It's one of those episodes. Here we, and so on and so forth. So yeah, we're going to talk about those two, and then we're going to talk about films in this vein of the kind of film where you hear on paper that doesn't sound very good, but then actually you don't make films on paper. You make films with a wide team of people in a variety of different art forms and skill sets. So we're going to talk about those.
Okay.
Things are going well so far. 6 minutes on the clock, and we've probably got about 20 seconds. So does anybody want to talk about films that they've been watching recently? Annie, do you want to go first? 'Cause I know that you watched a very good film yesterday.
I did.
In lieu of watching the films that we're going to talk about on the podcast.
Yes, I did. I watched a film called Bye Bye Tiberius, which is directed by, I'm trying to remember how you say her name, Lina Soalem, who is the daughter of Hayam Abbas, who most people know as Brian Cox's wife on Succession. And she is a Palestinian actress, and the film kind of takes her as its subject matter, and it looks at kind of like her journey having like left Palestine in, I think, the 80s to go and become an actress in Hollywood. And then this idea of return and the returns that she also did with her daughter in like the 90s. And it's a lot about, I mean, obviously Palestine, homeland, about like ideas of rupture, what it means to like come from somewhere that you no longer belong to or that you're made not to belong to. It was really beautiful. Like I really, really loved it. Like really, really moving. Makes really interesting use of like archival footage. There's like a lot of home video stuff. The music is really beautiful, like the score is really well done. And it's very different to what I expected. It showed at Venice. And I remember looking at it and being like, oh, it'll just kind of be a bit of a like career-y film, like about her like acting career. And that barely comes up at all. Like it is a lot more about like these, like this family and these like various generations of women. And she's tracing back like her grandmother and her great-grandmother and all of these kind of moments of like essentially like migration, but forced migration this family has had to undergo. And yeah, I really loved it. And I am so grateful I watched it because the last film on my letterbox before that was Bride Wars, which I gave 1 star to. And that was 2 weeks ago.
It really does take all sorts.
It really does.
This film game, doesn't it? So Bye Bye Tiberius, there's actually a screening of it with a Q&A this Saturday at the GFT.
Yes, I remember this. Yeah.
So if you're listening to this the first few days it comes out, Saturday the 22nd of June at the GFT, 8 p.m. And then there's also a screening lined up at the Cameo in Edinburgh on the 2nd of July.
Yes.
At 6:30. And it'll presumably be out and about other times from that, but that's what I found from doing a quick Google.
Yeah.
So
I think the actual release date is something like the 27th or the 29th or something of June.
I think it's 28th of June.
28th of June, there we go. Yes.
So yeah, but it'll be on at various points, but if you want to catch it early after that glowing recommendation.
Yeah.
This Saturday, GFT. 8 o'clock.
Go.
Get it. A good film on this episode. Let's see if that continues. Jamie, you've been watching anything good?
I finished Scavenger's Reign. I don't know if you remember, I mentioned it on the podcast, I think last time. Yeah.
I was in Barcelona, so I didn't.
Have you listened to the episode?
Yeah, I've listened to it.
Okay.
So, you know,
Just checking.
well, anyway,
I heard one of you taking shots at me. I can't remember who
I think it was him.
I think I'm going to presume it was Jamie. But anyway, as you are.
yeah, it's a really great show on Netflix. 10-part animation. One of the most inventive shows I've seen in a long time. Really good, really heartfelt and imaginative. But at the weekend I watched a film I hadn't seen since I was a kid called Fried Green Tomatoes. Do you know that film?
Yeah.
Kathy Bates, Jessica Tandy, like a really great kind of 90s film that I hadn't seen at the time. I didn't realise it was a queer film, really, like because it's kind of hidden away. It's like 1993. Well, the film's like flashback a lot to the 50s where these two women own a cafe, the Whistle Stop Cafe. And yeah, it's so queer. It's like clearly the lesbians, but it's not said in the movie, which is so interesting. And I don't know, I kind of want to research the book and see if it was so euphemistic in the book as well, or is it something that Hollywood was shy about? But anyway, it's a really good film. All I really remembered it was Chris O'Donnell dying really early. And I was kind of crying again at that. Yeah, it's a really sweet, funny film. Kathy Bates is amazing. I think she's like a really underrated actor. And just it was nice to just see like it feels like a kind of Saturday morning kind of like watch. Although I did watch it on ITVX, which I was really annoyed about because, do you know this? Like people like they just edit the films. So I know they edit the films to put in the adverts, but they also just cut out scenes. So those scenes I definitely remembered from the film that were not in it. And I think a lot of it is because it has like themes of domestic abuse and racism. So I don't know if it was because it was before the watershed, but surely fair enough you cut it out for the broadcast. But if you're going to show it on ITVX, you can't just show a cut film, or at least say you're going to cut it out. I was really annoyed.
Or don't show it before the watershed. If it's like a post-watershed film, then just save it for
Well,
then.
it's not. It's like a very gentle movie. But yeah, I guess that there are sort of dark stuff in it.
Yeah,
You know, like,
but I find it weird that like, yeah, a TV channel could then control how that's, I don't know, I just find that kind of strange.
Because there's whole things where the plot doesn't make sense. There's a part where like a woman who's pregnant is thrown downstairs, and I can see why, okay, that might be shocking at 11 a.m. or something, but it doesn't make sense to the plot because it's like that's the fact that she was thrown down makes this guy even worse than we think he is. You know, he's the fact that he's willing to kill his future child as well as his wife. So I don't know. ITVX, put on the full film. I don't understand.
When I watched Dogtooth, the Yorgos Lanthimos one, every single advert in the ad breaks was for Candy Crush, which I tell you what, that's a jarring tonal shift. As a fan of the jarring tonal shift, I did appreciate it in a kind of like conceptual art way, but it really took me out of the mise en scene, shall we say.
Yeah, that's really weird.
Yeah. So shout out ITVX. Keep up the good work. Stop editing films and then making Jimmy watch versions of it that make him question his own sanity.
I've just been a cheapskate and didn't want to pay £3 to see it on Amazon or whatever. So.
That's fair enough. That's fine, actually. I think that's ethically good.
Yes. Give more money to ITV. Right. Let's get off this. Let's get out of this cul-de-sac. Ellie, you've been watching anything good?
I've been watching Interview with a Vampire, like the new series. Has anybody watched? It's really good. It's like, so like we all know the film more or less, the Brad Pitt, Tom Cruise one from the 90s. But it's kind of like, it's both its own adaptation of Anne Rice's novel and kind of a sequel. So the 1970s interview in San Francisco in the film with Christian Slater is like still canon. It still happened. Christian Slater in the film is kind of just a framing device, right? He just shows up at the end, shows up at the beginning. He's sort of like, oh, let me guess you're going to suck my blood or something. Like, and
That's so good.
But here it's set 50 years after that interview, and Daniel Malloy is now like a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist who's had a turbulent personal life with like divorce and drugs and stuff like that, and he has Parkinson's disease, and in the middle of the pandemic gets an invitation to Louis Dupont de Lac's skyscraper compound in Dubai to like get the story right this time. Eric Bogosian is Daniel Malloy, and I just love like that. It's so more interwoven, and I love characters who just constantly kind of question the narrative that they themselves are in, and he's a really good audience surrogate who asks these really interesting questions. Because when you think about it, like Anne Rice's novels were so kind of like groundbreaking because of the homoerotic overtones of the books as they came out in the 70s. But when you look at that now, it is quite problematic that like this incredibly liberating story about two men is in fact them being horrible monsters who abuse and kill people. And like Malloy even says that as he's interviewing the vampire, Louis, who is played by Jacob Anderson, who is Grey Worm in Game of Thrones. He's incredible. It's incredible. It's so much more gory than the film. I think that the film was very like beautiful and baroque and romantic, and it was, you know, Tom Cruise like I don't know, essentially sucking Brad Pitt's blood. But here it's like fucked up and like horrible, but at the same time it's more overtly gay, and they like talk about it in very explicit terms. The second season is currently airing in the US, but the entire first season you can see on BBC iPlayer.
Is the Kirsten Dunst character in the film? I can't remember if she dies or not.
Yeah, so Claudia in the book, when they turn a young girl and kind of keep her as a daughter in this very weird way, she is a character. She has a casting change. I'm not super sure why between the seasons. Maybe it was just like unavailability of the actor or whatever. She's the actor from the first season is just incredible.
Or the actor is aging, and unfortunately, children age really quickly.
Yeah, it's a bit harder to tell with vampires. But like, it's she's great, and again, like the show discusses how much more fucked up this is, and how kind of like subjectivity of the story and the suggestibility of memory is a big part of it. So as Louis is reciting his tale, like the questions that Daniel asks will change the scene that we're seeing in front of us, and it's like you're not sure who the reliable narrator is. Daniel himself, when he talks back about the 70s and what happened there, like that's still quite shrouded in mystery. So it's just really, really interesting, really compelling. Good show. Check it out.
That's a solid recommendation. I watched something that I wouldn't give a solid recommendation, and I don't think it talks as much about subjectivity or the nature of being. I watched Minions: Rise of Gru over the weekend.
Oh well.
Why did you do this?
Because it was on Netflix.
Did you wear a suit?
No, I didn't wear.
You didn't wear a suit sitting in your living room.
No, that moment had passed, unfortunately. It is, I would say, not really a film. It's a bunch of bits that are all kind of sellotaped together, and it feels like it was edited by an editor riding a unicycle wielding a chainsaw. Like there's just stuff going on all over the place. Nothing really coheres together that much. But the thing about the Minions is there's a reason that they're in every meme you ever see when you stroll back over to Facebook for 2 minutes. They're somehow like a completely blank slate and really fun and endearing. I don't know how those little guys do it.
They're rude little mischievous boys, aren't they?
They're
naughty.
They're like mischievous
scoundrels.
Gender-free.
Yeah.
Tic Tacs and dungarees. My favorite minion is Otto, the little kind of squat one, and he has what I described in the office the other day as a character line rather than a character arc in this film, in that he essentially loses the MacGuffin. He goes to see somebody about it, and literally the first person he goes to see is like, oh yeah, that guy's got it. And then he just chases him in a straight line on a tricycle for about 20 minutes. He tracks him down, and the guy just makes friends with him immediately. They go and see the world's largest banana. Next thing you know, they're in Chinatown in San Francisco at the climax of the film. It's great fun.
Great. I guess like this maybe aligns with what you're saying about this not being really a real film, but it's a complete surprise to me that Minions have names and individual like beings.
There are lead minions, and then there are the kind of supporting cast, the background players of Minions. It's like it's like in an orchestra. There's like first violin, and then the other violins.
This is like
there's Bob, and then there's the other small minions.
This is like going through Looking Glass, because I just never understood why these films were popular. I remember vaguely, because I've seen Despicable Me, and I remember vaguely that they've been in it. I didn't understand how they spawned sequel after sequel, and how people were going along to see them. I don't understand the appeal.
It's because they basically only do sight gags, not even like kind of language gags, because they speak, I believe, Esperanto. So they just are little cute funny wee guys who make funny noises that most people can be like, haha, funny noise, and they say banana a lot.
Kind of like The Sims.
Yeah,
do you remember?
Exactly. It's like watching. Yeah, they're basically like a cross between The Sims and those little alien guys from Toy Story.
They
From
remind
Grabber
me so
Machine.
much of. Do you remember the Raving Rabbits?
Yes.
From like Rayman.
Yes.
I never played those games, but there were like adverts that just kind of dominated one summer of television. Of these like small, like there's a bunch of them. They all look the same. They're small little cute guys who talk in gibberish and like get up to all kinds of hijinks.
They are the smoother versions.
Yeah.
Of the Raven Rabbits. Still love my boy Otto. So if you want to watch, and also for some reason, young Gru looks exactly like Frank Sidebottom, and Steve Carell. And Steve Carell is still doing the accent. So there we go. So that's a film I watched
Instead of Green Border.
Right, first film of the week. Should we do The Exorcism first? Get it out the way. Spoiler for The Exorcism. It's not very good. So, Tony is a down-on-his-luck actor drafted onto a remake of The Exorcist, after the previous star of this remake of The Exorcist dies in mysterious circumstances. Tony has a complicated relationship with his teenage daughter. He has a complicated relationship with the source material. And he has a complicated relationship with various substances. And as the shoot progresses, the film...
What a lineup.
All your pals are here. As the shoot progresses, the film and its cast become increasingly entwined in spoopy fashion. It's Russell Crowe, David Hyde Pierce off of Frasier is the priest, Adam Goldberg, best known as Eddie from Friends. First you sleep with my girlfriend, then you kill my fish, my buddy. This is unbelievable. Is the director of the film, and Ryan Simpkins plays Tony's daughter Lee. This film, as Ellie pointed out, the shoot began on this. So you might be thinking, right, Russell Crowe, Exorcism. Is this related to that film, The Pope's Exorcist? No, because this film actually started filming before The Pope's Exorcist and was then delayed in various reshoot hell over the pandemic. And now it comes to us in this, the year of our Lord 2024. Jamie Dunn, is The Exorcism any good? Long answers only.
Okay. Well, do you remember I said to you that when we watched Renfield last year, that this was the worst film we've seen in the podcast? I think we have a new contender.
I heard you saying that when I was watching the film. I remembered you hating Renfield, and I was like, Renfield was better than this.
Yeah, no, I was like, well, yeah, this is like totally recalibrated my whole thinking of the podcast and how I need to reassess every single film. But the thing is
what, do you just put an addendum, better than The Exorcist?
That's the ratings.
It's in the positive columns, it's always just better than The Exorcist.
The thing is,
has minions better than The Exorcism.
The thing is, I actually love these types of movies. Like, I love the Conjuring movies, any James Wan movie, the Insidious films as well, Hereditary, Ari Aster, Evil Dead, and The Exorcist. I love The Exorcist, and this film, like, just does not live up to any of those films. The setup is actually quite interesting. The idea of this actor getting possessed on the set of a remake of The Exorcist, I think, was quite intriguing. But my God, did it squander all that potential. So one of the problems is that it looks terrible. You know, the lighting is so dingy and muddy. Remember
Jamie, do you want to tell us who did the cinematography?
Oh my God. Well, I just found this out. So do you remember the last podcast I was slagging off this guy called Simon Duggan who shot Furiosa?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I just said, like, Furiosa doesn't look as good as Fury Road. By this guy Simon Duggan. He also shot this.
Oh
so
no,
Simon
he's
Duggan,
out to get you.
Your style does not appeal to me one bit. I'm sorry, mate.
I was not familiar with your game.
Yeah, it's like it looks bad. You remember, like, in the mid-90s, not mid-90s, in the mid-90s, like, horror films all kind of look quite similar. You had Saw, you had Hostel. They're all very kind of dark and dingy, and there was that kind of low lighting. And I think part of it was, like, digital was coming in, and these films were shot in digital, and they just looked bad. This film, you know, digital's been around for a while. People got better at shooting digital. This looks like a film from 10 years ago, at least. It looks terrible. And it just wasn't scary either. You know, introduced this backstory of child abuse, which is handled in the most crass way. The twists, I mean, there are no twists, really. There's no surprises. Dave Hyde Pierce looks like he's, you know, been held hostage. He looks like he doesn't want to be in this film.
He also looks like he's been recently exhumed from a grave.
No.
David Hyde Pierce does not look particularly like Fly in this film, let's say.
Yeah, but it's because the lighting is so bad. Everything
It's
looks
either
bad.
very good costuming or very bad lighting.
It's like, it just looks terrible. And yeah, he just, I don't know, I never knew, is he going to be a big twist? Is he going to be, like, possessed? Is he dead? I literally thought that was going to be the twist because he looks so bad and he's so wooden in the film. Is he, like, a ghost or something? But no, he's like a real priest. This is part of the plot. Anyway. Yeah, I'll just go see The Pope's Exorcist. It's just so much better. Right, Russell Crowe can do this stuff well. I think he can be quite funny and charming, and he can do this kind of creepy stuff. You know, I'd love to see him, like, do more horror films. But in that vein, that film was, like, funny. You know, he was driving around a moped speaking Italian. It had a kind of sense of irony about itself. This film just doesn't. It just doesn't know it's bad. Yeah, that's the problem. It's a film that's bad that doesn't quite know it's bad. I think it's trying to be good.
Very humorless.
And that's why it kind of fails, I think.
Oh, that's a shame.
Ellie, what do you have to say about this? A contrary opinion or more?
Well, when I like a little ways into watching it, I was kind of like, oh, I wish I'd rewatched The Exorcist in preparation for watching this, because the film just hinges so much on your familiarity and acceptance of The Exorcist. It is about this adaptation of The Exorcist being made. It clearly, it's like an unofficial remake, reworking, reimagining, follow-up fan fiction. The characters name drop The Exorcist at points. Like, they just clearly really, really like this. Later on, it kind of transformed into, I really wish I'd rewatched The Exorcist in preparation for this, because The Exorcist is good and this so clearly isn't. Like, the discordance is so jarring. Like, the characters are just so, like, wooden. They speak only in cliches. So with Russell Crowe having, like, he was like, I spent years at the bottom of a bottle. And it's like, oh, I've heard that line before. Like, there's a point where his daughter is like, oh yeah, my dad made me work as a production assistant on this film set because I got kicked out of school. And the co-star's like, why did you get kicked out of school? She's like, I don't know, I guess I'm too cool or whatever. And it's like, are you fucking Bart Simpson? What is And it's like, I mean, I don't know. There's a point where they're like, he's delivering his monologue and the director cuts and Eddie from Friends marches in. and you know, Russell Crowe's like, I don't get it. Like, you know, what do you want out of me for this performance, for this scene? And the director's like, you know what I want? And he gets in real close and he's like, you know, I want the truth. I want meaning. I want the meaning of the line. And it's like, okay, that doesn't mean anything. It's not helpful. An actor couldn't actually use that as a note. This film has a director. Surely the director knows what director's notes sound like and they don't sound like that, right? But because it's lit like shit, as you say, Jamie, and everyone's just muttering the whole time, you're leaning in, you're opening your ears, you're having to like peer into the darkness, and then like he steps off stage and a lighting fixture falls, there's a big bang, and you're supposed to go, wow. Like, let's talk about the scares of this film. There fucking aren't any, and there's no effort put into them when they actually happen. There's a point where the daughter wakes up in the middle of the night, and you can hear something in the night, and she goes straight to the kitchen, and it's like really eerie, right? Russell Crowe has just stood there in the middle of the room, in the middle of the kitchen, staring at the wall. And we like, this is quite early on, she like draws in closer and that like suspense builds and she reaches out and she touches his shoulder and bam, and it's like really loud noise. It's like, oh, I was sleepwalking. And it's like, that's what happens in this film. Nothing. Like, it's just, I don't want to be one of those people that like horror films are shit because they use jump scares. I think jump scares are like a really useful tool to have when you're trying to control the tension of your audience, right? But you have to use them in an interesting way. And there's just nothing tangibly scary in this film. It's just the lights flash and there's a loud noise every time. And even, slight spoilers, when the actual exorcism happens as kind of like the grand finale, yeah, there's no designed monster. There's no existential dread because the subject matter is being discussed terribly. It's literally just a strobe light effect to suggest something's happening. There's some kind of transformation happening. It's like, yeah, really bad.
Yeah, and skip forward maybe 45 seconds if you don't want the end of this film spoiled. He does actually just do an exorcism on the guy. So like it just reveals that actually like exorcisms as practiced by the Catholic Church do work,
yeah,
and they are real. Which I would say is a strange note for this film to end on.
And you can't do them as a layman, as an actor.
Yeah, provided you're good enough at acting and you've had enough of an emotional journey to this point, you can literally exorcise demons, which have been like, and also there's a weird kind of like transference. It's a mess. It's a mess. And like there's one good bit in it, which is that right at the very, very start, they established that they've built this entire house set on a soundstage, and it starts like, and forgive me, the director of The Wonder for making this comparison, but it does start very similarly to the start of The Wonder, where it kind of pans in.
Todd Haynes.
No, is it Sebastian?
Yes, something. The
Sebastian
one with Florence
Leo.
Pugh.
But it starts very similar to that. If anyone saw that, where it's like, it's talking about how these are all just stories and our story begins on this boat, I believe, or a train, possibly some kind of transport. And it does like a kind of zoom in through this soundstage into a realistic depiction of what a boat or a train would have looked like in that period of time. Mm-hmm. And they hint that they're going to do something much more kind of like meta and interesting to talk about like how this is a film about making films about this kind of thing. But actually that is just where we are. Like we're just on because the film is called The Exorcism, so that's why there's exorcisms involved.
It's like a 2-story house, right? But because it's a set, it doesn't have a fourth wall, so you can see into all the rooms on 2 stories. And the opening scene, the guy's like going through each room in the house, being like, "So this is where the actors will be. They'll say their lines. They'll say the power of Christ compels you," or whatever. So you think like, okay, we're at a height. You could fall from that because there's just an open wall, and it's like, no, that doesn't happen. There's just a flash and he dies. He just dies by ghost, like not in any explicit way. And it's like
he gets got by the ghost.
early on, we're taking a walk through the special effects workshop where you see animatronic skulls that like latex recreations of the actors' faces will be placed over. One of them goes haywire and starts jittering about and then bursts into sparks as a suggestion that this set is haunted or something like that. And it's like, oh, so are we going to have this like special effects, props, costumes coming to life? Is the film going to bleed into reality? Is it all, like none of that happens. Like there's no effects applied in these like scares or anything like that. It's just, you're right, completely squandered.
Yeah. Or even that set is not really used again to affect, what's the point of having this amazing set and not using it? And you can imagine a director using it in some interesting way where you have something happening in one corner, or you zoom out and you see the whole thing and the whole film plays out like that. But yeah, the film actually just doesn't have any sense of place at all. Like, I think it's set in New York, but you would never know, like, because you don't really leave this movie set or their apartment, which is like, apart from one moment where Russell wanders out naked into the hall, and that's it. That's like all the where the whole film's set. And it's like, it doesn't have a sense of, whereas The Exorcist had such a sense of place. I knew every room in that house and how you can move around it. Whereas this just doesn't have that.
It's not very good.
Yeah. Do you want a little?
You didn't miss much.
Do you want a little bit of trivia though?
I feel fine about it.
Go on.
The director is Joshua John Miller, who is probably best known as the kid in Near Dark. So you remember, weirdly, similarly to the Kirsten Dunst character in Interview with a Vampire, he's a young kid who's been transferred into a vampire. So he's a middle-aged vampire, but he's like 12. And that's a very good film. So he clearly wasn't paying attention to Catherine Bigelow while he was 12. He was probably mucking around. And you could have got some tips on how to make a better film.
And remembered them for 30 years.
And also the fact that the lead character is called Tony Miller and the director is called Joshua Miller. Crikey, this wasn't a particularly good one. The Exorcism is out at some point soon, presumably. Maybe
Maybe best not.
I think it's out
Just
on
keep
Friday.
that one.
It's out on Friday. If you want to see a quite bad film, but it's nice. Always nice to see Adam Goldberg get some work. So there you go.
I love him. He's great.
His character in this is an absolute dick. Jamie, dare I ask, what's your letterbox score for this?
I mean, 1? Like,
Okay.
it's just not good.
Ellie?
Yeah, 1.
I'm going to give it a 2
Ooh, why?
because of the big house,
Okay,
I think.
sure.
They did build a big house. That's why I gave it the 1, because like people arguably did do a good job at some point
Yeah. I think it's
somewhere along in this line. That's why it's not a 0.
I think it's a sympathy 2 for me, but it's not going to make much difference. So yeah, The Exorcism's out on Friday. Just watch The
And I
Exorcist
like
instead,
Niles.
to be honest.
Even if he does look like a zombie.
David Hyde Pierce died for this. Right, so not a great start, but we'll move on to the next film of this week, which is a film called The G. So, Anne Hunter, the eponymous G, and her husband are taken from their house in the middle of the night by corrupt court-appointed legal guardians. They're then imprisoned in a care home, the guardians sell their house from under them, and the G does not like that. So the G builds towards getting revenge on the guardians with the help of her granddaughter Emma. Dale Dickey plays the eponymous G. Romaine Denis is her daughter Emma. This is played at Glasgow, I believe, to some acclaim. Ellie, I'll come to you first because Anahit didn't watch this one either. Anahit, not Anahit. Anahit, what did you think of the G? Wait, there's no time. I'll have to go to Ellie first.
I was looking forward to this film because I'd heard that it had done well at GFF, but I got to admit I kind of walked away from it a little bit unsatisfied. To start with what I like Dale Dickey. Dale Dickey's great. She just has a very good screen presence. She brings a big range of emotions to this film, and it all kind of is built around this seething discontent. She's like really, really powerful in the film. Early on, they're like being interrogated by these people that are like obviously like trying to screw them out of their money, and she like it's quite horrible. She sort of realizes she's powerless to stop them. She's not going to give them the info, but she's going to get hurt for it. And she just looks the villain in the eye and just screams like a fucking animal. And it's just like, God, it's such a compelling like performance. It's kind of a shame that she doesn't really do much in the film. Like she doesn't get much to do. I also really like her granddaughter, who was it Romaine Denis was her name?
I believe so. Canadian.
She's like on this hunt for justice. She's like working from the outside to break her out. She doesn't necessarily have a strong stomach. She's quite young, but she does kind of idolize her grandmother for her like don't give a fuck attitude. And that's I think wherein the feels that there's a transformation in the film, is that their relationship, like there is an emotional growth that you can study here between these two characters. But other than that, the film is very bleak. It's set in the middle of nowhere America. It's set in like an elderly care facility. Its subject matter is elder abuse and conservatorship racketeering, or like at one point, like the villain says like, oh, politicians and businessmen and gangsters are all the same thing around these parts. And it's like, I get it. Like, it's not going to be John Wick. We're dealing with like quite a real, like very sad subject. So you're not going to like go out all guns blazing, but it's like, I don't know, to me, there is a little bit of embellishment in the sense that Dale Dickey turns out to have come from this like West Texas crime family. And that seems so much more intriguing and interesting than anything that actually materializes in the screen. She just, because of this, has the power to contract a hitman who just has complete unwavering loyalty towards her, despite the fact that she's meant to be financially immobile. And he goes out and does what little amount of action there is in the film, like he's the one that does it, against the villain's similar looking henchmen.
We'll get onto those too.
So like, yeah, there is like a little fantasy that plays out on the edges, but the film really keeps it on the periphery. Like our protagonists and antagonists never really do anything much dynamic. They're both working through these like dogs' bodies or whatever you call them. There's a scene where the G is like made a friend at this facility and like is looking at his old hunting rifles mounted on the wall, and she's like checking down the sights as she talks about her tortured backstory growing up in this crime family. And it's like, you don't need Anton Chekhov to tell you that this is a good setup to like have these guns get used later on. But 10 minutes before the end of the film, she's like, have you got your guns? And he's like, I don't have any bullets. And it's like that. So she just has to make do with a handgun. And it kind of just feels like you could have just had them running around with hunting rifles. That would have been cool. Like that would have been like exciting. And it would have been empowering as well, because it's such a long film of seeing her kind of like, trapped here. Like, I get it. It's not an action film, right? It's a thriller. But if a thriller doesn't have action, then it should have intrigue. But we know really early on what the problem is and who the bad guys are and what they're working towards and how, like, we're working to get out of that. So, yeah, I kind of just felt like it was leading up to something that never really satisfied.
The G, by the way, stands for grandmother. Jamie?
She's the OG. I was dreading watching this. I actually, because of life things, I couldn't get this on until like about 1:45. And it was like, I saw the runtime, it was an hour and 45, and it's like, oh my God, I'm going to be up to 2 o'clock in the morning watching this. But I was absolutely gripped. I thought this was a great little movie. I really thought it was good. And I agree that it does set up a lot of expectations that don't pay off, but I kind of liked that. I liked how it's a revenge thriller, which is one of the most kind of overused, rote genre, and it kind of surprised me at every turn. So it has this kind of amazing opening image, for example. So I was gripped from there. Is this person being buried in sand? And then it just cuts away and we don't know what that was about. And it's like, it only becomes relevant much later in the film. And then we switch to this woman who's just an old lady who's getting told off by her doctor for like unhealthy living. And it becomes like a drama, and she's got this sweet relationship with her granddaughter. And I wasn't quite sure how this was going to become a revenge thriller. And then it just suddenly does. I don't know, like I just, through the power of this actor who's just fantastic, she's just like, she just like conjures up like such anger and like in her face. She's fantastic. So yeah, it's a film that just was so surprising me. It takes lots of sort of turns. She actually starts this kind of relationship in the care facility with another man who's there, and that was a surprise. Like this in this middle of this revenge thriller, there's actually an interesting relationship, and it's a proper relationship. They actually have sex. When did you last see two 70-year-olds have sex in a film? And it was shot not as a joke. It was shot like it was meant to be a sexy scene. So it just surprised me. I think it respected these characters so much. And I do, the daughter, the granddaughter character was also interesting with these two women who are from different generations, different backgrounds, but they're being sort of pushed around by men. And it's like about how they navigate it. And one is trying to be more like her grandmother and trying to be tough. The grandmother also has these kind of moments of grace where she realizes maybe vengeance isn't the best thing to do. And there's a surprising moment where she finds actually even the people in the care home aren't all evil. So it's a film that just was constantly had a lot of humanism, which again surprised me in this type of film. Like I was just expecting a B-movie, like revenge thriller with blood and violence, and it does give you a little bit of that, but actually it gives you a lot more. It reminded me a lot more of something like Winter's Bone, which Dale Dickey's probably most famous for, but also like films like Hell or High Water, these kind of films that are set in kind of nowhere America, but actually even though they're set in these kind of like generic places, they actually have a lot of atmosphere. That's the thing. It's like, unlike The Exorcism, this film is just full of atmosphere. I understood these places, and I felt I knew these kind of corridors she was walking around. So I just was really impressed by it, and it was really gripped. It's also got a kind of Coen-esque quality where it has got a wry sense of humor. I think there's some funny moments where she just arrives at the nursing home and there's like a no smoking sign. There's a close up of it, and I feel if you watched that with an audience, you would have got a laugh. There's also some very funny things about the courting with this guy that she's this older guy that she's met at the care home. Like, that's all very funny. So there's a weird scene where actually the granddaughter goes skinny dipping with this guy. Just for some reason, he can't swim. He doggy paddles. It's those kind of quirky, offbeat moments which made me realise this is a film that is not trying to be fit into any Hollywood mode, or any kind of cookie cutter genre. It's actually got its own weird kind of rhythms, which I really appreciated. Like, that scene is bizarre. It's sweet. It's like from a different movie, and it's just plonked in this thriller. So yeah, from scene to scene, I really enjoyed this. I agree, maybe it's a bit overstuffed and it doesn't quite all hang together, and sometimes the motivations of characters don't quite make sense. And I could see how that if you were expecting some sort of payoff like you would in a normal genre movie, you would be disappointed. But I kind of liked the fact that it just zigged when I thought it was going to zag. And yeah, I kind of dug it like a lot,
If you were expecting some kind of payoff, you've come to the wrong film. This is the most when are we going to get to the fireworks factory film I've seen in a very long time. It's a revenge thriller that for me just didn't have enough revenge in it. And that's kind of like, we've kind of talked around that. So I'm not going to talk too much about that. What I'm going to talk about is technique in action scenes and being able to, because the thing about like action is it's not just about throwing people on screen, and it has to be quite kind of balletic and quite like choreographed. What you don't want is two characters who look physically almost identical and then have them do a slow motion poorly lit chase through a car park. So there is a henchman for the baddies. I've turned to Anna Heat for her benefit. There's a henchman for the baddies who is a medium height white guy with a ginger beard and a bald head.
Okay.
And then
actually, he's the goodies.
You got to.
Right. And then there was a henchman for the goodies who is a medium height white man with a bald head and a different bit of facial hair. And they both wear black bomber jackets and black jeans. The goodie is introduced and immediately starts a slow pursuit of the baddie. But it is, I would say, at points hard to tell literally who you are looking at. They look the same as each other. Like this is the same man. You cannot fool me. You cannot get this past me. This is the same man twice. You try and skimp on the budget by just hiring one person to play two roles. Fair play. That is inventive, but you're not gonna catch me again.
This is why Bruce Willis and Jason Statham were never cast in the same movie.
But if you cast Bruce Willis and Jason Statham when people didn't know who they were and you dressed them identically and then you made them chase each other at extremely slow speed through a car park, I think people would be right to say like that's a bit confusing. Come on, lads, let's sort it out. But I see we're gonna have to agree to disagree because Jamie just gave me that look that said I don't agree with you.
Yeah, I would highly recommend this film.
I'd be willing to believe that it would play better in an audience. I think you're right. I think some of those scenes would probably land like a bit better if, I don't know, if just the weirdness evoked some kind of like crowd response. That might help me place myself a bit better. But as it stands, I was watching it like in my flat in the afternoon, and the film just visually doesn't really try and grab you at all. It doesn't really fight for your attention. Everything's kind of washed out. We don't have like a very strong sense of place. So it's like, I don't know, maybe it is one for the cinema because you'll be shut out from everything. But I found it kind of difficult to just care about.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I also did watch this after The Exorcism, so maybe it's like,
it's all relative. Ideal double bill.
Just after you discovered your newest bedrock.
Yeah.
It's like eating a puddle after eating a bowl of
mud.
Yeah, it's like the flavour.
We were talking earlier in the office about how you need to eat mud sometimes to get your gut biome back.
You got to watch a terrible film every now and again. It's good for you.
I've always thought there would be something very satisfying about eating mud. Do you know what I mean? Like, does that look like really appealing?
No,
that is famously how they brackets mud get you. Right.
Being sold something by Big Mud. It does though. Like, you know how like lava also looks like you just kind of want to like touch lava.
Yeah.
There's something about mud that just looks a bit like it would taste really good.
it looks like Looks
No,
like
it
poo.
doesn't though. That's the thing. It looks more. It's like dense.
Do you mean like dry mud? Do you mean clay? There's different types
No,
of mud.
I mean like the really squishy mud. Like, you know, that it's like it looks really
Like
like
clay.
earthy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like when you're like walking
clayish, yeah,
when you're
yeah.
walking through the woods and you almost lose a trainer.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
it just
yeah.
stays.
Isn't there just something really satisfying about that? You're
No,
like,
not really.
Anyway,
I want to keep my fucking trainers.
I haven't seen the films, so this is all I have to offer.
Jamie, your rating for the G.
Yeah, I think this is a solid little film. I'd say 4 stars.
For Ellie,
I'll say 3.
I'll say 2, mainly tactically, so that we give it a 3.
Yeah.
What would you actually say?
Probably like 2.5, but then
Okay.
I don't believe
But
in
who
half.
wants to do
That
that?
maths is hard.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. So that was the G. It's out this Friday. It's better than The Exorcism.
All right. I'm not gonna watch it either.
And
I'll
that's
be honest with
the
you.
end of that bit. Okay, and then for the chat bit at the end of this episode, which has gone swimmingly well so far, we've all had a great time. Anahit's been checking some PDFs.
I've been proofing.
You're like, well, the films aren't good. I may as well get
Yeah.
something done. We are going to talk about a type of film that I feel like we sometimes eschew on this podcast because we tend to watch films that are supposed to be good. Well-made films. Clever stuff. You know,
Sure.
the good shit. We are going to talk about films that are good, but really don't have any right to be as good as they are. Your 5-star, 2-star films. Your films that the premise is like, that shouldn't work, but then actually it kind of does. Your films where vibe and presentation come together in a way that you didn't quite expect, but it totally works.
Yeah. We've
We've all got some examples. Anahit. Dare I come to you first?
Imagine if I were like, no, I have nothing for this either.
And she's turned her mic off as well.
She's leaving. She's leaving the studio. So I have a couple of examples. One I have only seen once, but it was like the first thing that came to mind when one of you suggested this, which is the film House, which is a 1977 Japanese horror, which is one of the very few like actual proper horror films that I've seen. Although it is really like a kind of, it's meant to be funny, like there is a kind of satirical element to it. But I think the reason that I'm like, oh, maybe it kind of works in this category. But I'm interested actually whether it was meant to be as schlocky as it appears or whether that is them kind of like buying into it. But it is just like the most fucking ridiculous film. It's about, is it like this group of girls that just end up in this house and this house is basically trying to eat them? There are these incredible, terribly like visual effect done scenes where like the piano will eat a hand and the hand will like continue playing. This cat like keeps appearing and it really looks like someone has just like, yeah, oh my God, you have the cat.
my desktop wallpaper is the cat from House.
So good. And it like looks like someone has just like cut it out of paint and just like dropped it in whichever like scene that they want to drop. And it's just like really, it feels so inventive. It reminds me of a lot of Ray Harryhausen films, and I love Ray Harryhausen films that like really tactile, analog, like visual effects, and also that just like balls to the wall, like what is weird and scary. You don't have to intellectualize it. It's just a bit like weird and fucked up.
It's really interesting because I love this film. It's very interesting that you're curious about how comedic it was sort of supposed to
Yeah.
be, because the director, apparently like a big part of the writing of this film is that the director asked his 6-year-old daughter what would she think would make good ideas for the film, a film where, you know, it's a haunted house, the house comes alive. So that's where you get stuff like scenes where like these like this big sort of like, it's like a big cupboard full of futons that like bury people, and it's like they
Yeah.
pile up on top of people and like suffocate them or whatever. Like that comes, so it comes from this very like imaginative, very like freewheeling place. And it's again that thing that you don't get in The Exorcism. Sorry to bring it back to The Exorcism, everyone.
Always.
But it's like, that's, you know, just not thinking interestingly about the film you're working in and how can we make that an interesting film.
Yeah, and that makes so much sense to me, actually, what you just said, because this whole film is giving goosebumps. Like, that is its whole fucking vibe, and I really like that. I respect that so much. So that, maybe, and then the other film, when you were like, oh, it doesn't have any right to be as good as it is my, like, number one, I will ride and die for this film, is Guillermo del Toro's Pacific Rim. Which is my favorite Guillermo del Toro, which I know is an insane
That is
opinion.
crazy. I actually watched half an hour of this. I thought it was
Yeah, this is what a lot of people say. But it's not rubbish, is the thing. I think it's such a good example of this kind of cinema. Even though this kind of cinema, quote unquote, literally the premise of this film is that the kaiju, which is like, you know, within this whole like Godzilla mythology, that they have like come to Earth and like fucking shit up. And so what does humankind do? In reality, humankind would just like nuke everything. Instead, what humankind does is they build these giant fucking robots to beat the shit out of the monsters.
What's better than Godzilla? Mecha Godzilla. Let's fucking
so
go.
Good. But I think what makes this film really incredible for me is the kind of mythology that Guillermo del Toro creates around it. So like these robots are they always have to be piloted by at least two people. And in the film, it's two people that are considered quote unquote drift compatible. Like the drift is where you like go within the robot to kind of basically sync with another person's mind. So you're kind of pooling all of your like mental resources together.
Is this the robot emoji and the two fingers coming together?
Yeah, it literally is. Yeah, which, that's my happy place. But it's like such a beautiful thought because it's like this kind of quite radical idea, I think, of like intimacy and like coming together. It's like so fan fiction-y as well. Like it's really that idea of, oh my God, what if there was one bed? What if there was one robot? Yeah. And you had to mind meld with your crush.
Yeah, what if Harry and Louis had to co-pilot the mecha to go and take on Mothra?
Which is like so fucking good. I just really love how like it's so earnest in its feelings, which I think is like really beautiful. The way that like the whole thing, again, like the world building is constructed, usually with these kind of films, it's incredibly Western, incredibly US military. Most of this is set, I think, in Hong Kong. And the kind of team of people that are responding. There's one American guy that's played by Charlie Hunnam. Charlie Hunnam in this film, a man, like so hot, like truly so hot. But then you have like Idris Elba with his like very, very good accent is like running the whole show. You have like Australians, you have his adopted daughter who I think is from Hong Kong, I'm pretty sure is meant to, no, she's from Japan. Hang on. Anyway, point being, it's like this very kind of like international response to disaster. And I really, really like how it thinks about like so many disaster movies, as our friend of the podcast, Katie Go, wrote a very, very good book about like apocalypse fiction, apocalypse films, and how they are often really deeply conservative. And there's something about this film that has like a really expansive idea of what it means to respond to crisis that I think is like really, really beautiful. There's the guy from, not the Philadelphia Story, the other one.
Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
The other Philadelphia Story.
Jimmy Stewart.
Jimmy Stewart.
Who's he drift compatible with?
Yeah, Charlie Day.
Jimmy Stewart and Cary Grant in a 400-foot tall metal hedgehog being like...
Oh, that would be the dream. Yeah, Charlie Day, isn't it? Like being an absolute fucking lunatic. Yeah, it's just like really, I think it's such a good fucking film. And I remember when I saw the trailer for it, I think came out in my last year of uni, I'm pretty sure, that we would like see the trailer play in the cinema. And it was just like, what is this fucking shit? And then it became a really big film on Tumblr, of course, because Tumblr loves fan fiction and Tumblr loves a trope. And it just like became, I don't know, yeah, it's like really one of my favorite films. There's like this really interesting like fight scene that Guillermo del Toro has talked about, like he films it as a sex scene. There's just like a really interesting way that he approaches like people interacting with each other that I think is like so fucking good. Everyone's hot. The monsters are really cool. The robots are sick. I don't know, I think it's great.
I don't really know what happened to Pacific Rim, because I know that like it sets this world up so perfectly, right? Where you could make a Saturday morning cartoon or like
sequel, I think.
I know, but then they made a sequel
and that
didn't have anything to do with Del Toro. It got really poor reviews, and then it's just like the project's over. And it's like that's really weird because you've kind of set up. I mean, there must be like, I don't know, comic books
there
at
are
least,
comic books,
and like video games or something.
Yeah, I think
so. Yeah, because that's how it sort of feels. It feels like a absolutely perfectly made world with so much replayability. Yeah, it just served up on a silver platter, but like it kind of never became much more than the film it was.
Yeah, which is a shame. I think it's great. I can't believe you got half an hour in.
I don't know. I maybe should rewatch it. I just thought it's more the filmmaking. I just felt like the action scenes were rubbish. Like I really did not enjoy it. Like I maybe should rewatch it again. I just like gave up. It was like I probably will rewatch it again, because when I watched it,
I had a lot of difficulty telling all of the blonde white men apart. There's like 3 muscular blonde white men.
Yeah, that is.
And I kind of got a bit entangled, kind of like the henchmen in the G.
You need to just know that one of them is Charlie Hunnam and the rest are just around.
I know more. I know Charlie
Much
Hunnam
like
better.
the minions. one of them is Otto and the other's our background minion.
To me, it's memorable the CGI. Like, I feel like something about, like, if it was an animation, maybe I'd have enjoyed it more. Or if it was more practical effects, maybe I'd enjoyed it more. Like old school, like literally men in like suits fighting.
Yeah.
But there's something about like, it's like I feel the same about like Transformer movies. I just can't get
No,
into
that's
them.
fair. And I've never seen any of those. I don't know what it is about this film, but there's a point where like one of the robots pulls out a sword and it like stabs one of the monsters in space.
Yeah.
It's just really good.
Each one has its own like personality, like its own design, and then its own special moves and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So again, it sort of feels like, and then people started making fan ones for each different country that might create a Jaeger, and someone made the Vatican City Pope robot.
Hell fucking
To bring us back to
But
the exorcism.
I think you should watch Neon Genesis Evangelion.
Yes, that
Okay.
also
Which is like
slaps.
definitely an influence on it.
Really?
Yeah, it's like
Okay.
it's like another kind of mechas versus. It's a different type of monster, but yeah, it's very good and very and it's about melding with a creature. It's very interesting.
Oh, it's so sick.
There's actually a book. This is kind of a bummer because it's like much darker, but there's a book that came out a couple years ago called The Iron Widow, which imagines like this science fiction Chinese mythology situation where the city is constantly under attack from Hunduns, which are a mythological like Chinese monster, and they have created a similar situation. It's the same premise as Pacific Rim in that they're defended by giant mechs that are piloted by 2 people, but the male pilot's brain always overwhelms the woman pilot's brain. So it's a society of systemically killing women until along comes the first woman who can overpower a man's brain.
Oh, this is good. That's a good premise.
And it's a good book.
He's back. He's back in.
That's like someone hearing like, oh, and then this guy kills all these people. Oh, I'm not sure about that. But then he gets caught. Well, now I'm all right.
The author Jiran J. Zhao was snubbed at the Hugo Awards. A lot of people suspect because that was the year the Hugo Awards was hosted in China, and the book's actually quite critical of the Chinese government. So
Interesting.
check it out because they are not getting the Hugo Award when they deserve it.
Okay.
I think we can do a running sprint from Neon Genesis Evangelion to Ellie's pick
Yes.
for this. If we stick the landing, I'm going to be very
So
pleased with
my
this.
one
Podcasting, ladies and
for
gentlemen.
films that have no right to be good, I don't think it really counts because it's good directors and it's good actors and it's like really fun special effects teams. But maybe the reason that it has no right to be good is because, well, the Wachowskis' plan was to create an experimental live-action adaptation of the 60s anime Speed Racer with action set pieces that are entirely in bad 2008 CGI with a non-linear narrative structure that they modeled after James Joyce's Ulysses. It was
What could possibly go wrong?
I mean, people did not like it, but I think they're wrong. It was a project, like a Speed Racer adaptation was in development for decades. It was originally Julian Temple, who directed Absolute Beginners, who was going to be directing it. Then it was Alfonso Cuarón, which would have been really weird. And apparently Warner Brothers were like overjoyed to discover that the Wachowskis were really, really interested until they found out what the Wachowskis' plan were. And they were like, no, please God, no. And then, like this crazy, just like visual headache comes out in 2008. Critics at the time were very clever. They were like, this is more like a car crash of a film. Get it? Ha ha ha. But it became...
Because of the driving. That's
It became kind of an underground hit with like internet nerds, and then some people have like reappraised it as a masterpiece. And I gotta say, if you can accept that there are going to be like graphical limitations for its time period, I think that you could have a lot of fun with this film. It's a very vivid, like psychedelic fantasia that looks like early lol so random YouTube videos meets Hieronymus Bosch. Like it's like the Phantom Menace in the sense that there are just actors on a green screen set with no surroundings, and the film's just been animated around them. So it's like Bedknobs and Broomsticks meets Death Race 2000. The actors are like John Goodman and Susan Sarandon. They're mom and pop racer. They're like giving really warm performances. They're up against this evil racing conglomerate who are interconnected with these gangsters. So it's like Bugsy Malone by the people who directed Bound. It's very anti-capitalist. It's very like anti-bureaucracy. And like, here's the thing. This is like the Wachowskis knew this was going to be the most wide-reaching film that they'd made, right? Because it was going to reach families. It was going to reach kids. It was kind of like in that same summer that I think Iron Man came out. So no wonder it probably like struggled with getting people to see it. But like they predicted it would have this really strange reception because they were going for a really unconventional film, but they thought kids had like more flexible imaginations. And like, yeah, I got like, it has this modernist stream of consciousness, out of order structure. It jumps backwards and forwards in time. It's got like dream sequences and montage. In keeping with The Matrix, it has like a central mythology, whereas the villain, who's Roger Allam, is like giving this really gripping, eloquent speech about like his evil plans, whilst we're also cutting away to like the B plot of a chimpanzee racing through the factory floor. Like he's explaining to Speed Racer that, you know, they're gonna litigate Mom and Pop Racer to death with bogus lawsuits, that even if they would win, their small business model can't keep up business while doing it. And he like imagines this future, and it's really like, it takes us away for a really long time. And when we come back, he kind of like looks him in the eye and just says, "You're the devil," in those words. Like it's very impactful. And then the New Yorker review of the time suggested that because it was so anti-capitalist, it had to be fascist. And it's like, Bestie, are you stupid?
New Yorker, swing animus.
The truth is, like, you might hate it, right? Like, it is a very long film, and some of the action sequences just look like levels out of a Sonic the Hedgehog game. But, like, you know, that's something that the Wachowskis kind of predicted, that some people would just find it ugly. That was part of their vision, to make this weird. They're like, one of their visual templates was Guernica, for its like modernism, its cubism. And so, I don't know, like, even if you're one of the people who I just think doesn't match with this film, because that's fine, not everyone's going to enjoy it, I do think that throughout all of the intense sensory overload and monkey jokes, you will, like, come across scenes where you can tell the filmmakers and the cast and the crew are, like, very earnestly trying to win you over. They're, like, really trying to charm you, and you get a good sense of belief from everyone involved in this film. So it's really, really nutty, and probably has no right to be as enjoyable as it is, considering it's just so weird. But I like it. It's really fun.
They also wanted Gus Van Sant, Hype Williams, and Vince Vaughn at various points to be in Dream Blunt rotation.
Yeah, truly.
So that was Speed Racer. Jamie, what have you got for me? Something fun, no doubt.
Well, I was gonna just shout out a few 90s high concept films. I feel like we don't really make films like we did in the 90s, which all of them sound terrible, but actually are all masterpieces. So I'm thinking of films like Speed.
Yeah,
you know,
banger.
You know,
what's better than a film that also has that film in it again, but quicker at the end?
Exactly. Or Face Off, you know, like, or Mrs. Doubtfire, or Con Air, or Dude, Where's My Car? You know, these films which have stupid premises.
The Rush Hour films.
Yes, the
Jackie
Rush
Chan
Hour
and Chris
films.
Tucker are two different types of cops. Why would we like them? They're both cops. Oh, it turns out they're both legends.
But that was just I just want to say, Hollywood, make more high concept 90s style films. I do love them, and we need to make more.
More arcane premises that people are completely committed to. Like, just things that you're like, don't think about it, just enjoy it. And don't touch his radio.
But my real shout out was actually going to be to poverty row films from the 30s and 40s. So like back in the 30s and 40s, every film kind of played as a double bill. So like there was like the A movies made by the big studios, and then you had these other independent studios who were making these kind of crummy films for no money. They usually ran about 60 minutes. They were very basic, but some of them were great. And I really want to shout out the films of, I forgot his name, Edward G. Ulmer, who was this kind of crazy guy from Berlin who came over to Hollywood having these kind of big dreams of being like a kind of like major Hollywood director. And he never quite did it. But I think if you actually look at his films, there was so much ambition about them. And especially want to shout out Detour, which is like, it's one of these films, it's like a noir film from 45. It is so strikingly inexpensive. You know, the sets are like completely minimalist, like it takes place in these kind of like motel rooms, which are made up of just like a bed and a lamp, or like a scene on the street is just like a lamppost and some dry ice. Like there's no sets. It's like so basic. It's basically almost like it's on a kind of like a soundstage. Like a black box. You know, all the driving scenes have these kind of very obvious rear projection, but he kind of makes, like, in his hands, like these kind of limitations become a real asset. It makes the film kind of like almost impressionistic, you know, like, and film noir is also like that anyway. Like film noir has this, has amazing line. It already has a unreal feel, and he just takes it to the nth degree, so that it feels like you're watching a nightmare rather than a film. It's like very dreamlike, and the film is like so twisty and turny. It's like kind of ridiculous when you think of exactly what happens to this character and all the coincidences that happen to him on his journey. He's traveling from the East Coast to the West Coast. His wife's left him. He's going to meet her, but then he gets all the money and he meets a woman, and it's like a classic noir film in terms of its plot. But what really elevates it is Ulmer's just his way with the camera, his the skin flink techniques he has to make sort of great cinema. And all his films are really good, but this is like, I think, one of the great American films. And it's kind of a shame that he never got to like make a film on a big budget, because I could imagine that he would have made a film as great as Hitchcock or as great as Orson Welles if he had given that money. But even working with like Peanuts, he makes these really imaginative movies. And Detour, I think, is probably his best, certainly his most well known. And it's like, it's 60 minutes. Watch it on YouTube. You'll have an absolute blast. It's like amazing.
Nice. I think the thing, maybe actually the film that got me thinking about why we could have this conversation is one of my favorite films that shouldn't be nearly as good as it actually is, which is The Running Man, 1987, based on a Stephen King book published under one of his many pen names and starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. So the premise of the film is that in the futuristic year of 2017, people are like convicted criminals, convicted of like serious crimes, are forced to compete in fights to the death in a game show called The Running Man. So they'll be taken and just like launched into this game zone where they're chased around by professional wrestlers with actual weapons. Now that sounds ridiculous, but the things that make this film great are the pace, the sort of like, I would say, light Verhoeven vibe, where it's not super satirical or like super kind of clever, but it has enough of these kind of like digs at things like American consumerism and like American TV culture that it has a bit of a kind of like, oh, that's quite clever. But also the costumes are great. Everyone loves an Adidas tracksuit, and these are absolutely banging. The characters of these chasers, who are things like a guy whose chasing zone is an ice rink and he skates around.
The opera singer. He's so good.
Guys with like big lit up mohawks running around with chainsaws. A film is going to be good if people are committed to what is in it and they're like, you know what? There's no point in pissing about. Let's make this film fucking stupid. And you know what? They did it.
Actually, I mean, it's probably way before you had reality TV as well. So it's actually kind of imagining reality TV. And then it has things like, I remember there's like a scene where there's like a deep fake where they pretend that he dies in the film, and it's like they digitize his face. And it's like, that's just like talking about now. It's like, actually, it is a film that's sort of imagining the future.
It is clever in the points where it needs to be clever and stupid in the points where it suits it to be stupid. And it goes at a really fast pace, and it doesn't outstay its welcome. And for this kind of film, that's what you want. It moves with haste. And also there's some good catchphrases and like silly Arnold Schwarzenegger chit chat in it. And there is also actually one of the rare instances of Arnie getting shit chatted back to him when he gets launched into this pod and says, "I'll be back." The corrupt host of the TV show says, "Only in a rerun," and then just hoofs him down the stairs.
Oh, that's good.
That's funny.
He does get wrecked eventually, but he gets one in on the way. So, most of these films, I believe you can watch on some kind of streaming platform. Like Jamie said, Detour will be just on YouTube because it's in the public domain.
Yeah.
Because of the 1940s. So I think that's everything we've got for this episode of The Cine Skinny. Thank you, Anahit.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Jamie.
Just here.
Thank you, Ali.
Thank you.
We'll be back in 2 weeks. I won't, because I'll be at Glastonbury.
Does that mean I have to watch the film?
I think, unfortunately, it does mean it makes it statistically likely that you will have to watch the film.
All right.
Hopefully there's some good films released.
Yeah,
Yes.
hopefully. Jesus.
But you know what? You're all giving them good reasons to tune in next time. So yeah, we'll be back in 2 weeks. Goodbye.
Bye.